Get the Finance Committee meeting started for Tuesday, January 30th, 2024 for the Keystone Central School District Board of Directors. Call the meeting to order. And I don't know whether if we have, I don't think any public.
Or committee
So-
chair.
Is that on there? It's really not.
It's not on there, but it's just a housekeeping issue. We have to pick the committee chair since it's the first meeting of the year. So
Okay, well,
I'll nominate Jeff to be the chair.
I'll
Okay.
second that.
okay. Do we have any other nominations? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of myself being committee chair? Say aye.
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 Yes.
President
Go ahead.
Butch,
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I don't think we can have someone chair two different committees.
Yes, you can. So the only thing I know about chair is you can't be the president or vice president. Can't be a chair.
Okay, okay. I remembered it wrong. Thank you.
All right, any opposed? Okay, hearing none, we will move on with the agenda then. Under discussion items, first one, we have several on the items on the agenda today. So the first one is the end of year update for the 22-23 school year. So Joni's going to be pretty busy here this afternoon, so we'll let her start with that.
Okay,
item.
I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Okay. This is information that we have discussed in the past, but I just wanted to go ahead and go over it again, just because it leads into what the administration had recommended to the board at the last board meeting regarding the surplus of funds for 22-23. As you recall, the expenses came in about 83,857,033, revenues at 86,197,781, which left us with a surplus of 2.3. The recommendations from administration was to take that 2.3 surplus and commit 1.7 of it to Fund 10 capital projects for the Liberty Curtain project cost. This is cash that can be in addition to the bond dollars for the project. It was also recommended that you transfer 600,000 to Fund 32 capital projects for the 10-year facility plan projects such as the Bucktail locker room and the installation of the rooftop units at Central Mountain High School. The next screen shows you with predicted not moving the money, we would be sitting at an unassigned fund balance of about 10%. A healthy fund balance is somewhere between 7 and 8 for the size of our school district. If we would move, commit, and transfer the 2.3 surplus funds, it would put us back down to the healthy 7.2%. And you can see the capital projects fund has increased from 863,000 to 2.5. This is also taking out the 600,000 and transferring it over to the capital fund 32. So that pretty much sums up 22-23 as we had discussed in the January board meeting.
Any questions for Joni on that?
I've got a question,
Okay, go ahead.
Chairman Jeff.
Yeah,
The $1,700,000 that we are going to move over for 10 different projects for Liberty Curtain, what is that money for?
That's for the additional project costs that will not be covered by the bond. There was an
And-
increase in the cost of the project due to the bids just coming in higher than anticipated. And this is in addition to the bond money that we already have we already have received half of the bond money.
Jerry, can I interrupt one time?
Sure.
Second? I
Absolutely.
think the misconception, because I think I just heard Chris say the 10 different projects.
Yeah,
Fund 10 is a
Fund.
number that indicates what that fund is. Fund
Understood.
10.
Okay,
yeah, where
Okay.
that- where that money's coming from.
Yeah,
And
all
misunderstood.
right. I was just curious about it because I'm like, well, we already got X amount of $1 million to build it. What are we adding to it that we don't know about?
Yeah.
Understood. So to kind of give you a high level, Fund 10 is our general fund balance. It just happens to be called General Fund 10.
Okay,
Fund 32 is a capital project. It's an accounting term that school districts, public accounting uses different funds. So Fund 10 is the general fund. Fund 32 is the capital projects. And you also hear Fund 39, which will now be our Liberty Curtain Project Fund that we will use. So when we
Okay.
do things from Fund 39.
so the money that we got in grants for Liberty Curtain aren't gonna cover it all, is what you're saying?
The bond money,
bond.
yeah, the
grant.
bond
Oh,
money,
okay.
yes, will not cover all of those expenses, the projected expenses. So we are setting aside 1.7 additional dollars for
Okay,
capital projects.
And
for-
what
for
we-
all
Liberty.
right. Thanks for explaining that.
Chris, one of the things we talked about in the past is we know there's gonna be soft costs involved.
Right.
I don't, something we just talked about at the facilities meeting.
Right.
About the insurance policy we have to have. And there was
I think. the demo-
inspection inspector we have to hire. That's all soft.
Right.
And we anticipated doing some of the demolition
Right.
with our funding. So it'd be at the completion of the building of the project, we still have to demolish the old building. So part of that, we
Right.
have funding ourselves to keep the bond down as low as we could.
Well, see, this was all done before we came on board. So I'm just trying to play catch up.
Right, that's why,
Sure. And those are,
that's why I thought I heard you say about 10 projects. I kind of thought that's what you were thinking. There's 10 different things. That's why I
Yeah.
wanted to explain. Sometimes I know it's difficult coming into this system to figure out what's
Right.
going on. And with Joni and Chrissy and them, they know what they're talking about, but sometimes they forget we don't. So we have to. kind
Well,
of-
I'm sure they do.
Yeah.
There's no problem there. I was just curious.
Just don't be afraid to ask a question. Just,
right.
if you don't understand, it's better to find out. And
That's why I asked.
Yeah, that 1.7 million, we had kind of earmarked, like Butch said, for some of these additional costs, so we didn't have to roll it into the entire bond to keep the total bond, the amount of money we borrow in the bond as
Right.
low as we can possibly do it. So that was one of the ways that we were able to keep the cost
Jeff,
down.
one of the other
Okay.
pieces to that was Audrey Bear said to us, by doing the bonds, 2 different bonds over 2
Right.
different years, that also kept structuring it this way, kept the cost for the bonds. We got a much better rate, and Joni can probably explain that better. But that was all part of the using the capital funds,
Hmm.
that 1.7.
Yeah, I understand it now, but I'm looking at a whole big picture of us spending $83 million for the year, and it only costs the county $55 million a year to cover the whole county, and I'm trying to look at all the eggs in the basket, that's all.
like I told you, the county doesn't have to provide education to
Yeah,
the kids that we do, and they're not mandated by the Commonwealth to provide services like we are, so you just can't, it's not apples to apples, that's more like an apple to a grape.
And they don't have as many employees.
well,
nearly
I
20
understand all
employees.
that, I'm trying to look at a big picture. I'm trying to see where we can start saving money versus keep spending.
Well, if you can find some ways, Chris, we're more than
This-
happy to listen to you.
I think we're
I
all,
appreciate it.
All right. Any
Jo-
other questions?
Joni, right?
Mhm.
You said about this percentages, this at 10.4 and the 7.2. That, explain that to me.
So typically 7 to 8% of your budget
Okay,
is unassigned, should be unassigned number that a general fund should have an unassigned number and then committed funds. Your unassigned balance should be somewhere between 7 and 8% of your annual budget.
Recommended by the Commonwealth.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. PD. Yes, absolutely.
okay.
And you'll hear that again when the auditors present this coming
Absolutely.
week, because they'll go through the entire
okay.
audit report.
What,
And that's what they'll tell you that you kind of look at your unassigned fund balance, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's kind of like your savings account
It is.
for your district. And they like to keep that, tell you to keep it around right where it is there, 7-8%, because those are the things that you need if you have emergency things that come up, and you need to go pay for something that you weren't anticipating, or like as they always seem to do. And
So you're saying it's better to have a lower,
no,
they don't want you to have,
they don't want it to be
they
below
don't want
what,
it below what,
I think about.
because I'm looking at
5%.
6%. Yeah. 5%.
6 million at 7.2 and 8 million at 10. So they want us to be down at the 6 instead of the 8.
what the state recommends you to stay below that 8%. What they want you to have is so many months worth of finances
Typically 3.
available, 3 months.
3
In
months.
case, and we haven't had it happen in a while. When the
Right.
state says, we're gonna argue in Harrisburg and not give you your money
Mhm.
and hold it, and they've done it. If you worked for
Yeah.
the state for a while, you
Yeah.
probably remember them not paying us.
Oh, yeah, I
So-
do.
This is what we have this money here for. When the state says we're not gonna give you your money, we can continue running for 3 months. And that's what they recommend, a 3-month.
Okay, because I mean, that 10% there is a higher dollar than the 7.2.
Right.
Right. The 10% was with the 2.3 surplus. But
Okay,
what we said was, why don't you take 1.7 million of that
Yep.
and commit it to your capital funds, your
okay,
capital projects, and then
that's-
take 600,000 and transfer it out to Fund 32, the capital project fund,
right.
to help with the capital project, the 10-year plan projects.
And that
Okay.
accounts
So
for the
now
difference.
that will drop it down, the next column, the last column over. Having done that, moved that money, it will go back down to the 7.2% of unassigned fund balance.
Okay,
What we try to do too is look, you'll see there's 1 million committed to technology, some to
Yep,
personnel,
yep.
some to Peaser, some to health. We try to project out. And I will tell you, this year is a good example, technology. We are spending quite a bit of money on technology this year. So we've committed 1 million of that. There's a very good chance at the end of this year, we will go in and use some of that committed fund that's sitting out there for technology. Per the
Oh.
board approval, but it may very well be an admin recommendation that may happen. So we
Okay.
try to, foresee what will we need to spend our money on going forward and then commit those funds.
okay,
Probably, maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, maybe another thing, like the health insurance reserves,
mhm,
we already know, from
Mhm.
with me talking to Joni, I know that our health insurance package is not looking good for next year. All the companies that we're dealing with, looks like they're gonna
Consortium.
raise it. I think this year went up, what, 10%?
They said double digits.
Next year
Last year,
did.
they raised it 11%.
And next year they're
That's-
looking at going
It
higher,
sounds like
the
it's gonna-
cost of insurance.
it
So we
sounds
have this
similar
money
to
in
this.
reserve, so we're not gonna have to say, we need an extra $1 million here. If we have to, we can take it out of that reserve.
yeah, I know mine's going up in July.
That's why we keep putting it there, yeah.
Mhm.
So we try to, this is pretty much looking ahead through the years. We've looked ahead and thought, this is where you're gonna need money, like the Peasers. It's kind of similar to what your SERS is.
Yeah.
We never know what it's gonna be coming. It's kind of been stable last, what, 4 or 5 years? hasn't it?
Peaser's that rate actually dropped
Oh,
this
so-
year.
so It
Mhm.
used to be a pretty wide fluctuation between what we thought it was gonna be and what the state said we have to pay.
Mhm.
So that's when we started that fund years ago.
They're still
But-
astronomical.
Mhm. Okay. I just
All right.
was wondering.
Good
they-
questions. Anything else on that first part on that review from the
I think
update?
Elizabeth has a question.
Elizabeth,
Yes, thank you, Chair Jeff. Something that in the following on the same agenda, we're gonna see all the new grants. I know I keep bringing up the G word. I know, year after year after year. It would be really nice if we could really commit you have a conversation, the board with administration, and really commit to not spending any more general fund money on any safety or electronic materials that we can go for grants. I know there's some things that were critical that we had to get for the kids' safety, and I will always stand by that, always. But I think we should sort of maybe slow down and maybe next month really look at what our other options are as far as funding these things. Okay, I better mute.
All right, if there is nothing else on item number 1, we'll move on to the second item, resolution 142, to commit funds.
Yes, that just goes along with the presentation where we talked about administration recommending to the board to commit that $1.7 million to the capital projects in Fund 10. So that will go, if you so approve, that will go to the board for approval at the February board meeting. The second one is the second resolution for $600,000 to be transferred to the Capital Fund Project 32. And again, if approved and recommended, that will go to the board for approval in February as well.
So those are basically the 2 things we just talked about.
Mhm.
Moving those 2 sets of, or 2 amounts of money from the 2 different fund areas for the Liberty Curtain project and for the other construction
I
projects.
think it's important to remember, anytime we move money into Fund 10 or Fund 32, it takes a resolution to move it in
Right.
and a resolution by the board to move it out. So it just, we have to make this resolution to put that money in there. And if we, when we take it out, especially the Fund 10, to start helping pay with some of the cost of the Liberty Curtain project, we'll do a resolution to take the money out. So it's a resolution in, resolution out.
And you
Also
will,
want to remember too that, I'm so sorry. We also want to remember too that anytime you move money out of Fund 10, it cannot come back. You move it to 39, it stays in 39 or 32. You cannot move anything back into the general fund.
and you will see that, you'll see these resolutions on the agenda for the work session.
So you're
And
saying we commit that 1.7, we can't bring it back. We
Nope.
have to
The
spend it.
1.7 is
Not
actually
the
being
general fund.
committed in Fund 10.
It has to be spent there.
No. So the 1.7,
Yeah.
we're not taking out of Fund 10, we're just committing it in a, it's kind of like a bucket, in a capital projects bucket in Fund 10, the 1.7.
Mm-hmm.
The 600,000 we are transferring out of Fund 10 into the capital projects fund. That can't come back. But yes, we have to spend it,
We have to
that
spend that
600,000
600.
and 1,000, yes.
We have to spend that.
Let's say, for example, though, the 1.7's in Fund 10, you can uncommit money through board resolution. You can uncommit money if something else were to come up that you would see a need to spend that money somewhere else. You can uncommit it within the fund, Fund 10.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
And one of the things we just talked about, facilities, we know there's gonna be a project with the HVAC system at the Central Mountain High School that we're looking at probably about $4 million over a 3-year span. So we
That's
know
more
we're
than
gonna
that.
need funding for that. We're looking at alternative sources that the state's coming up with, but if we have to invest our money, that's where this money is gonna come from. So we're kind of putting it away for a project such as that, or Liberty Curtain, the demolition of the building, or so the money set this side for projects. So we can't use that funding for buying curriculum or things like that. It's for projects. I guess I said.
We can commit that money to the Liberty Curtain, then we don't need it. We can bring it back and use it.
You can uncommit it as long as it's still in general Fund 10.
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth,
Yes, Chair Jeff, thank you. I think that's really, Joni, you brought up a really good thing. And that's something that's on my list that I was hoping to bring up maybe in 2 months. Let the new superintendent, ease into the position. But that's something we don't really do well on our webpage is fund this, fund that, fund this, act this, act this, act this. We don't have a descriptor page, a real easy to find, navigate, to explain. Okay,
is the,
so sorry about.
I don't know whether, I'm not sure that the public is gonna understand the different funds very well, but
Okay,
anyways,
thank you.
those,
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, Chair Jeff. The
Go
person
ahead.
stopped walking by. I'm so sorry. And that is something else that we, with the policy, the naming rights. Okay, that's something that's on my, again, 3 months out bucket list. That when we're talking about Liberty Curtain in about 3 months, 2 months, what can we get named in that building? Whether it's a section of the building, we'll have that discussion when it comes. So in other words, my whole goal is to get the taxpayers' costs way down from that and then put it into things that are like an emergency, like what Rob was telling us, the HVAC or some other thing that the board and administration will figure out. But I really want the discussion for the naming rights to come up, and that may help offset some of those costs, Tom. You know, so that's on the back burner. But again, the definitions, I think that's something I'd really like to talk about in the near future. But Joni, thank you very much for putting this together. It's very difficult to understand, and it's not your fault. It's just acronyms, and we're getting there. We're getting there. Thank you.
all right, moving on to item number 4. And this is another of Joni's presentation, the 24-25 budget update as of today.
Okay. Go ahead and share my screen again. This is the updated 24-25 budget update. The next screen or next slide is the timeline. So we are, right on target. Just note that March 14th, we will preview a general fund, budget development where we're going to start really shaping what the budget's going to look like for 24-25. So keep in mind, we'll have some decisions to make as admin recommends and the board, what we want to do going forward.
Just, we have new people.
Mhm.
Can we explain how we developed the timeline?
Sure. I will tell you, it's all Pennsylvania Department of Education, which is PDE. It's all PDE driven. They tell you exactly when you need to submit certain paperwork up to their system. So all of these dates are absolutely driven by PDE. The tax one index comes out fairly quickly in December. And then that is how you know how much you can increase your taxes up to the Act 1 index.
Tell them what the 7.1% would generate.
Yes, we'll get to those in the
Okay.
slides.
Slides.
Actually, yep,
Okay,
Yep.
all right, I'm getting ahead of myself.
yep, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, I think it's important that, I think that we all know that everything goes on that June 13th date and you backdate it.
Mhm.
That's why we have the May 9th, we have to propose, because that's be displayed for 30 days and
Absolutely.
advertised. So that's where the dates are all coming from. I think it's important we all know that.
Yes. Yeah, they're, like I said, they're all PDE driven. There's usually 30 days in between each time you have to update their PDEs. It's called CFERS website. And you have to actually notify the public so many days in advance, so many days after. So again, these dates are PDE driven. You'll see that they're continuous every year. May, you need to adopt the budget, the final budget. June 13th, it has to be uploaded or adopted, the final through the board, and then uploaded by the 30th. So again, these dates are all driven. And
And
they continue to be the same year after year.
And that Act 1 index changes from year to year.
It
And that's
does.
based upon the consumer price
Price
index
index.
and how much inflation, with the inflation rate in the last couple of years, it's been much higher than it typically is. But that 7.1% is your ceiling as to how, if you were going to raise your property taxes to the max, that's how far you could do it to that point. If you go beyond that, then it has to go to a referendum for a vote, by the vote of the people. So you'll be able to see in the next slide there, what if we went to the max as far as property tax. And I'm not saying that we will. Or want to.
Taxes and I don't want it to be at
We all do.
Well, I don't think anybody does,
Yeah.
Tom,
Yeah,
but I'm
but-
saying if you had to do that for whatever reason, that would be, and we already voted a couple months ago, I believe, as a board that we would not exceed that. So that's the amount that we would be able to increase if we absolutely had to.
The next slide shows you, this is the general fund balance as of 6/30/23. There we talk about, I talk about the buckets. This is what we have committed. This is without the 2.3 transfer because the board did not approve that yet. So this is showing the unassigned at 8.7 with the 2.3 surplus in it. So I just wanted to make sure everyone understands that's what we're looking at. Capital Fund 32, which is the capital projects, as of the end of June, had $1.9 million. The next slide is you've seen this slide. It was the exact same slide that was in the last presentation that shows this is what it is as of now proposed is when it gets committed and transferred per board approval. Okay, now we get into the slides where this is our 5-year financial picture. And I will tell you, typically, when we get to this point, the current budget, which is 23-24, currently is balanced. You don't usually see a deficit where we're sitting at for the current year. However, we did not receive $4.6 million of state level up money due to the state budget. They decided to allocate that money through grants and so forth. So what we were predicted to get, we did not. So that is why you're going to see a shortfall. I also want to say that when we first did the budget for 23-24, where the ESSER funds, that was 5.148. What I'm trying to do is have some kind of balance between this year and next year and not have such a, I guess, a bigger deficit next year versus this year. I'm trying to even it out a little bit so that we can work on each year, decreasing that deficit. So what I did was I took $2 million and moved it over for 24-25. Also, there are many, I talked to Megan in curriculum, and there are a lot of things that she would like to purchase that is eligible for learning loss as part of the ESSER grant. 20% has to be spent on learning loss. There are many things that she can spend learning loss on for 24-25. So it just makes sense to move the money over. And to, like I said, to help level each year that we can work on decreasing the deficit. This is with no tax. And this is dependent on an 8% benefit increase. And again, that's probably low. I'm not, we don't know that yet. And this is starting reserves of 18 million. The next slide is if you increase the millage by 1.78%, which is equivalent to a 25% increase of the 7.1. It will yield about $467,578 of additional tax revenue. So you can see that 24-25 went from, I'm going to go back to the slide, 3.9 to 3.4 due to the additional around $500,000 increase in the tax. The next slide will show you maybe. Not sure why there we go. Sorry about that. The next slide will show you a 3.55% millage increase, which is about 50%. That will yield about $935,155. There you can see in 24-25, the deficit is now 2.9. 5.3% millage increase, about 75% of the 7.1 will take it down to 2.4. So this is just showing you the options. I did not show you the 100%. Maybe I did, but no, I did not show the 100%, but I will tell you it will yield about 1.9. Now, these are all today's numbers. This is what I know today. This is all dependent upon the calculations under consideration. I will go back through, all the department heads have submitted their budgets, and I'm going back through and trimming those. Because they put in what they request, and then we go back and go through their supplies, and we do a zero-based budgeting. So we would go back through and make sure what they're asking for is really what is needed. We're also going to meet with, administration is going to meet with HR and go over position control. Is there any staff that we can repurpose? Is there attrition that can also yield in decreases in staff? Healthcare rates are always a big concern. We have two collective bargaining agreements in negotiations right now, that's support and secretaries. That is going to have an effect on the budget as well. Cyber and charter and Keystone Central Virtual Academy enrollments will also affect the budget as well. I know Justin Evie, who is the director over Virtual Academy, is again doing what he can to pull kids back into either the brick and mortar or the Keystone Central Virtual. Into consideration too, we always have to look at how we are going to fund our capital projects. Typically, every year, we move over 600,000 into the capital projects. I'm not sure that's an option for next year, given our restraints with just Fund 10. And again, it might be where we actually use Fund 10. We don't balance, and we have to actually use unassigned or committed funds. As you can see, we will have a decrease in ESSER funding. There will be no more ESSER funding after 24-25. We must use those funds by September of 24. So even when we move the 2 million over, they must be spent by September.
Did they extend that?
No, not that I heard.
I think Francie told me at the IU that's been bumped to December.
Okay, I've not seen any notification of that, but that would be great.
Yeah, I'm thinking it would give you some extra time.
Okay,
to use it.
that would be great if that was going to be the case. We'd have more time to spend the 2 million. I'm actually meeting with Megan.
Yeah, check on that because
I will
I'm
do
pretty sure
that.
that she said.
Have
that
anybody else seen any? I've not seen anything come from PASBO or, okay.
I
we'll
don't
look
know.
into that.
Um,
As I've already stated, we had that decrease in that state funding. Again, that's no longer included in our budget going forward. We have seen a decrease every year for the past 4 years in title funding. Frank and I talked about that. Dr. Redmond talked about that. We're going to look into, and see because
What's title funding?
title
Sure,
funding.
Title I
Yeah,
for
Title
Federal-
I.
It's federal.
Federal
funding.
money.
Yeah, federal.
It's, yeah,
Mhm,
it's.
Federal, yeah.
So
yes.
title money comes from the federal government. It's part of what minuscule amount they give us every year.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yes. I will also tell you
It's
too, doing
becoming
some
more
calculations
minuscule.
from last year, our local tax collection rate is slightly lower. Last year it was 93%, or 2 years ago it was 93%. The past year it was 92%. So again, you're bringing in a little bit less money because your collection rate's lower.
Why is that?
This is where the next is really up to, administration and the board to decide what potential tax increase you may or may not want to consider. Then, as always, there's the investment opportunities. What I will tell you is that we made about $375,000 with the CD that we invested $7 million. So that's actually later on as an agenda item that will expire in March. All of our other money market funds are about 4%. I was able to also get the bond money, which is $9.5 million. I was also able to secure that at 4.196%. Typically, they will only give you that to you at a checking account rate of less than 2%. But because of the size of our district, they allowed us to have that, which is huge. That's nice. So that's additional interest that can come into the district as well. So that kind of concludes the presentation. So there are, again, thoughts and considerations on how we want to proceed. The administration will work on continually decreasing that deficit number through, staffing, repurposing, again, decreasing department budgets. We're also going to probably stop spending somewhere in March, meaning just put a halt to any additional spending for the rest of the remainder of the year. more than likely, if you haven't spent it by now at this, at your level in the school or in your departments, you probably don't need it probably for the rest of the year. So we will look at, all of those things to decrease that deficit gap.
I think it's also important that we bring up that, and this has been one of my pet peeves since I got on the school board in 2008. If you look at that first slide, I think it is with a June 13th date, that we have to have our budget passed. The state doesn't have to pass hers till July 1st. So what happened last year,
Hardly ever
we
did.
were promised $4.7 million in level up funding. They tell us to base our budget on this promise of what they're gonna give us. We based our budget including that 4.7 level up funding. And then all of a sudden they did not
Pulled the
pass the codes they needed to spend that money. They've been fighting since July 1st about passing the codes, and now they're not doing it. They put that funding into another revenue source that they haven't told us how we're gonna apply for it yet, that we might be able to use for some of our building projects or renovation projects. Like, it's like the HVAC system that we keep talking about. We might be able to get some money from that, but they haven't even figured out how to spend it yet or how to apply for it so we can get part of it. And it's been going on since July 1st.
Mhm.
So we're $4.7 million short and
No.
anticipate that money for this year and in the future, because usually what they give us this year continues on in the future. So that's why our budget is looking so bad this year.
This might not be the right committee to talk about, but why are we always talking about replacing AC units? Why aren't we just repairing them?
Well, because the ones we're talking about are in this particular building and they're at end of life. They're the original units that were in this building when it was built 23 years ago or 24 years ago.
Right.
So Rob's guys have been keeping it going with Band-Aids and everything for the last, how many years, Rob? At least two or
Yeah, I
three
guess
or more.
There's a few pieces to it. Most of the equipment that here is rooftop units have a 15 to 20 year life. Most of ours are at 23 years, and it's actually in that last presentation that we just saw. We do repair. 4 or 5 years ago, we did some major repairs on rooftop units here, heat exchangers, a bunch of different things. I kind of equate it to you put a new transmission in a car that has 200,000 miles on it. The engine may or may not still go. We replace pieces and parts throughout on these things, but there comes a time when it's just cost prohibitive to keep throwing parts at these things. The other thing with that is parts become obsolete. A lot of the stuff for the rooftop units, the controllers, all that stuff is all a DOS-based program. Doesn't exist anymore. We can't replace that stuff. The Freon that we're using in them has been changed, and a lot of our systems are R22. R22 is being phased out. R22 is, we typically would pay, 10 years ago, $100 a jug. Now we pay $1,200 a jug. It's those kind of increases on some of that stuff. So they run their useful life. We've had them evaluated by outside agencies. They've come back, and that's where it's at. They're end of life, and it's time to upgrade more energy efficient stuff. Also, with some of the stuff that happened with, through the times with mold, dehumidification, all that, the systems weren't put in to take care of some of those kind of things. The newer systems do active dehumidification, better learning environments, some of that stuff. So, although I'm the kind of guy that wants to fix everything I can and make it work on the lowest budget we can, it just comes a time though where we have to start replacing stuff, and that's where the last presentation we had from McClure Company, we had a 3-year phase-in project for this building to start replacing some of that equipment.
And that's what we wanted to use, or hopefully are going to be able to use some of that money that was supposed to be in the level up funding, which the state moved over into a construction fund, which I think they moved $700 million. And it's on a grant-based deal where you have to submit a grant to them and hopefully they will fund it. But like Butch said, here we are going into February and they've had that money is earmarked for that, but they haven't told us how to do it, how we can apply for it, what the timeline is. But what we're going to do is try to apply for that and get as much funding. Because like Rob said, we're looking at a 3-year phase in for this project. And it's gonna cost, if my numbers were right, the total thing is gonna cost like over $8 million to replace these units. But to do it in a 3-step process over 3 years, if we can get the money. If not, then somehow we're gonna have to find a way to pay for this out of district
I'm gonna
funds.
say, just because of working with another agency that deals with tax dollars, it's really easy to treat it as an unlimited fund. Because I go through that where I work, and I'm sure you went through that where you used to work. It's just really easy. Oh, we run out of money, we just raise taxes. We don't care, we spend recklessly. And that's why I'm asking, why are we replacing rather than repairing?
Well,
Why do we tear down instead of,
It comes to a point sometimes where it's
I-
cost prohibitive to replace or to repair. than
Or
it is to
impossible.
replace. It's like the Liberty Curtain School. It was almost the same cost to renovate as it was to build new.
and had we rebuilt or reconditioned over the years in steps,
We did.
when you work on your house, you don't say, well, I want to do my kitchen. I'm going to tear the whole building down so that I don't have to buy a new kitchen.
That building has had some renovations throughout the,
And additions.
50, 60 years that's been there. There's been renovations done to it. But it just came to a point probably 10, 12 years ago where it was almost to a point where it was cost prohibitive to put money into it because we knew we were gonna have to do something bigger with it. So, but. and
I
as
guess
far
you-
as spending the
Because
funding.
I keep
I
going
know
back to when, with the Lock
funding-
Haven High School. That building's still standing, but yet we said it wasn't cost sufficient for us to
Well,
remodel it.
But how much money has the
But it's still
university put
standing.
into it?
Yeah, you know,
It
But it's
is, but
still
we,
standing.
right, it's still standing. But my point is, universities put millions of dollars into that to renovate it, and we would have had to do the same thing. And it's,
And we
it's like,
did when we built this school.
but-
it's like taking it, it's like you driving a 20-year-old car and you want to keep it running and it gets to the point where there's just so many things wrong with it. It doesn't make sense to keep dumping good money after bad. And that's where we were with that school. And that's the same place, same thing we were with the Lock Haven High School. I mean, yeah, it's still there, but the college spent a lot of money on it, renovating it, and we would have had to spend that or more, because all they basically used that was going to, I think, use it mainly for offices and so on. They may have a few classrooms in there, but we would have had to do it. It's a different story when you do it for a school, so.
Jeff, I think another important piece to talk about on that is when schools were, the original funding piece prior to Act One I think Act One was 05, timeframe 07, that we had PlanCon. PlanCon was a reimbursement program from the state that would come in every 20 years and do
Good
a
point.
renovation on your buildings. So when architects designed and built buildings for school districts, they typically build them on a design that they put equipment in, it would last about 20 years and then would need to be replaced, repaired or replaced, whatever you could do with it. And in 2007 timeframe, PlanCon got cut out. It may have been a little prior to that. I don't remember the exact dates now, but PlanCon was no longer funded from the state. And so school districts were no longer getting reimbursement for state project or for renovation type projects. So now you have buildings that were sitting there waiting in that time frame to be renovated. They were at 20 or 30 years and needing renovating, and the funding wasn't there. So the state cut that out, and they still said we had to go on and do all this. It's kind of like that mandated stuff that Butch was talking about earlier. They still said you're going to have to go on and educate kids and do all that, but we're not going to give you funding anymore to do that. So what you're seeing with school districts throughout the Commonwealth is PlanCon's gone. So now you have buildings that are going on 30 to 40 years old without any renovations because PlanCon's gone and they don't know how they're going to fund it. This building is at 23 years old And most of the equipment that was here was 15 to 20-year equipment. And we have done exactly what you're saying. We've repaired, and we don't have an abundance of money to throw at this stuff. My department is one that always gets hacked on at the end, or at some point, it always goes away. So we don't have an abundance of money just to spend money stupidly, open checkbook. We patch things along. We try and keep stuff going. We do the best we can. But when parts become obsolete, that's when I really start coming to some of the, the board and saying, we got to look at replacing some of this, because I can no longer get parts. I order parts on, at times you have to get them off of, secondhand shops, eBay, some of that, if you need a specialized contactor from one of these rooftops, the only place we can find them is on eBay, because they're not manufactured anymore. So we're buying used ones online through some broker or whatever to get some of this stuff running. So I appreciate what you're saying, and that's exactly how I think. I think that the rest of the board will tell you that, I'm pretty thrifty in what we do with repairing equipment. Usually when I come to you and tell you that it's broke and we can't really find pieces for it. And so we're trying to plan for long term and not spend money stupidly on these projects. So, when it's time to replace, the experts are saying, do it. We start to bring the pricing forward. And it's been very successful for us, or very good for us, to have these prices, and like the thing we presented at the facilities meeting, having that ready so that when a grant becomes available, we're ready, because the state loves shovel-ready projects. And, if we have to go back through and recreate everything, it takes time to get these prices together and all that. Some of this stuff we work on for a year, so we are not eligible for the grant. So we're trying to stay ahead of that curve and always be ready, have you guys having all the information, and have projects ready to go. But PlanCom was a big piece of what you're kind of going to, because the state kind of pulled the rug out from underneath, and now people are figuring, how are we going to fix this stuff? So,
It's,
One of the other big things we have to remember, that the state was taken to court for underfunding education in Pennsylvania, and they lost. It was determined by the court system that they're not funding education and putting it back on the burden of the property owner. And they're trying to get that switched, but I don't think anyone knows. And last I saw, it was billions of dollars that it's underfunded. They don't know where the money's going to come from. They don't know how to redistribute the wealth. When that happens, we don't know. But I know I've heard rumors that they're talking about taking them back to court for not following the court hearing. So we have to get the funding away from somehow our property owners in Clinton County and put it back where it belongs, on the state, because the state is required to provide a quality public education. It's part of the Constitution. They have to provide quality public education. They're not providing it. So they're paying probably, 52% of the state grant.
I don't even think they're paying that.
So it's just, so the other part is on you and I, the property owners. So we have to find, and what's happening to us in Clinton County, we're part of that lower socioeconomic background that doesn't have the funding. We don't have the properties. We don't have the high priced manufacturing companies coming in.
Oh, we have retail.
We're just what we are. So we don't have that funding like you might have in Lebanon County or some of the other ones that they're getting the same money we are. And so now their property taxes might be half of what ours are, but we have no other recourse. That's, the state went through a few years ago and put this cap on the index at 7.1, which is really high. I can remember it was in the 3s. So, but they keep bringing that up because it goes by the consumer price index, I think in Philadelphia someplace. But
And I think there are other costs that we have, not just building costs, facilities costs. I mean, we pay for a huge thing. Part of the budget is charter schools, cyber charters, brick and mortar charters. You'll see we pay for a nice chunk of our budget goes to the Sugar Valley Charter School. And also another charter piece of it goes to the cyber charters. All these online charter schools, we pay them. Well, look at your bills for payment on your board agenda this time, you'll see line items, several different cyber charters that just drain us. And I know that I saw there in the paper that they're supposed to be coming up with some changes with that. And I'll believe that when I see it, because they've talked about it forever. And it's the same way with, the state has pulled the rug out from under us
Mhm.
many times. And this last thing with the level up funding is just another example. We were counting on over $4 million to keep our budget in good shape.
And you
Now-
have to agree that when you overtax the population and the population moves away, now you're gonna continue to overtax the population, which is going to, again, drop your student, it's gonna drop your residents.
What we're finding is if we raise taxes,
And people
First thing-
leave,
first thing is gonna happen, your collection rate is gonna start dropping. You heard Joni said about our collection rate.
yeah,
Because people just can't afford to pay it. So when your collection rate drops, now that's funding that we don't have because people aren't paying it.
yeah,
So we try to collect it. Sometimes you can't get blood from a stone.
yeah.
So what happens then, the people that pay their taxes now get penalized again because now we have to raise taxes. to
That's
make up
what I
for
mean.
people.
You just,
So
you
it's a
just,
It's a
you just
continuous
end up,
circle.
you just end up overtaxing your population
And
and your
until-
population says, we're out.
Until we find another funding source, which I'm stuck on the fact that the state and federal government do not pay their fair share.
Oh, yeah.
So
I-
until we
I
get them to
agree.
pay their fair share, the only other recourse we have is to go after the property owners in Clinton County. And I personally, I'm on a fixed income, I've been on a fixed income, I'm not getting a raise, but I have to pay more bills. And I'm more fortunate than a lot of people. I know some of my friends' mothers that are on social security, they only get a couple $100 a month. It really affects the elderly like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. My mother-in-law is one of them.
Yeah, so that's what every time I look at this, thinking of people like that, but
That's why I'm always thinking about cutting rather than raising.
then again.
Chairman Jeff.
Yeah, I saw you, Chris. Go ahead.
In regards to what you're saying, I understand that, boom, our money's been cut, we haven't gotten any. So what that tells me, Joni's doing a fantastic job and I commend her for what she's doing. But if we're getting funds cut back from us, that means we gotta curtail our spending a little bit. Our out-of-state, trips to conferences and stuff that can be done by Zoom. That could save taxpayers a lot of money. How about we cut some of the fat off on stuff we do? Taxpayers can't afford to do all this. Like you guys just said, all I'm hearing is we're not getting this, we're not getting this, we're not getting this. But as a board, we should be diligently looking at what we can do to save some money, to cut some stuff. And I'd like to see that as a group all happen.
Well, we do that every year, Chris. I think if you look at that one slide that Joni had up there, she has a whole list of things that they look at every single year. And I mean, the administrative team, and they go through and they look at every single major portion of this budget, healthcare and.
She's doing great. But
No,
like last year, we spent $28,000 for a couple people to go to a conference in Nashville that their bill could have been all done on Zoom right from here. We just had people go to a water park resort for one. We got people going to Georgia for one. Those types of things can be curtailed back if they're Zoom capable.
I think
I'm just saying we need to look at what we're doing.
most of those were paid for with Title II funds, I believe, which were federal monies that were allocated for that kind of purpose. It wasn't like it was coming out of the general fund. I think almost every one of those conferences you're talking about was paid for with Title II federal funds and you that are eligible to be used for that purpose.
Professional
Yeah,
development.
what-
but just because we get a dime doesn't mean we should spend 11 cents.
Well, I realize
There's
that.
gotta be some things where we can curtail. You said about the charter schools are costing us a fortune. I agree with that. Because kids don't want to come to this school, they want to go to the charter school. Why don't they want to come to this school? We need to address those issues. Because there's a waiting list at all these charter schools. Why don't they want to come here?
Well, I'm sure that there are a variety of reasons for that, and I know that our folks here are working really hard to get some of these to come back, and we have gotten some of the kids to come back. It's not like we haven't gotten any back, but there are, I can't tell you what all the reasons are why these kids are going to charter schools. But the point with charter schools is that the charter school law was passed in 1997. It has not been changed since, and they're getting reimbursed a whole lot more per student especially for special education students than our district is. And the overhead and the cost for cyber charter schools is very low compared to what it is to run a brick and mortar school. And all they need to provide is a computer for kids and so on, and a curriculum. And basically the curriculum that those guys have on their cyber charter schools is the same exact curriculum that we offer in our charter school. And there's only a handful of them. And I know that we have a lot of kids using our charter school, or not our charter school, but our online portion of our curriculum. And I know that the point I'm trying to make is we are paying a lot more for our charter school costs, whether those kids are going to them or not. We're paying more out of our district budget than we should have to, especially for cyber charter schools. I mean, it's just, the whole law needs overhauled, and I see that
I agree totally.
They're attempting to do that now. And whether that happens or not, it's very frustrating because all of this stuff we've talked about for the last half hour all goes back to some of the indecision that happens down, and the vacillating that happens in Harrisburg. We should not be in this position, because if they were doing their job, which they're not, because they sit down there and they squabble around like little kindergarten kids over who's going to do this, who's going to do that. Oh, I'm not going to do this. You're not going to do that. And so it's a standoff. And
Okay.
Who suffers? It's school districts like ours. And it's not it's Keystone Central. It's every school that's a rural school that has a tight budget and a decreasing population. And
okay, so are you telling me that we're doing everything we can do and we're not wasting any money at all?
No, I'm sure there are some places
then let's trim where we can.
well,
That's all I'm saying. We can't keep blaming Harrisburg when we're not doing things diligently ourselves.
I don't disagree with you at all, Chris. I agree. If we can cut here and cut there, and I'm sure we will, but it's a process. And every year, the superintendent and now as Frank's taken over, I'm sure he's going to take over and sit down with all of those folks and go through every single line in that budget and see where they can, where we can save.
I hope we can, because the school budget's going up $15 million in 5 years. We can't do that over the next 5 years. There won't be a school.
Well, it's not.
I'm just saying, it's nuts to nuts. I mean,
it's
Chris,
not.
I think we all agree with you.
Yeah.
We all realize that we can't continue going like we're going. And we've had this same discussion
Over and
as
over.
long as I can remember. It's always pretty much the same thing this time of year. We have to look at ways to reduce cost, because we know we're not gonna get much of an increase in our revenues, so we have to reduce costs. The only way we can stay budget neutral. So what we try to do is look at what we need versus what we want. And that's, I think I hear you saying, and what we need to do is look at, and it's gonna be happening if you look at that slide, sometime in the next couple months, the superintendent and all the administrative staff will start looking at what we need as far as educators. Do we need, 25 special ed teachers, or can we get away with 24? But again, that's
Right.
dictated by what the state says. You can only have so much of a caseload for every teacher. So we have to go through it pretty much line by line, class by class, and looking at what we
Yep.
think we're gonna have next year, what we're gonna need to provide those services for those students next year, and what we can actually move around, cut, and reduce. So that's why if you looked at this budget thing, we start on it in December at that timeline, and we start going between now and the May 9th for our proposed budget adoption. There's gonna be a lot of changes on those papers. Everything we're
Oh,
looking
I'm
at,
sure.
so we have to
And-
start looking at what we can cut costs. We're looking at, talking to our insurance provider and try to get that double-digit increase changed, even if it means shopping around for new providers. We
And
have to do, it's our fiduciary duty to look at everything on this budget and start trying to reduce what we can, cut what we can, and do away with the excess spending. And as far
We
as,
have to do that. And like I said, I commend Joni because I've dealt with big budgets through different jobs through the years, and she's doing a good job. But she can only do what we say needs done. And you're right, we gotta look at what we're spending and we gotta start cutting where we can instead of just blaming everybody else. Before we blame anybody, we gotta blame ourselves. Maybe we're not doing due diligence.
well,
That's all I'm asking.
and I'll agree to disagree on that one, because I
Yeah.
think every year we look at everything.
we
But
did.
it's, like I said in the beginning, it's very difficult for us to build a budget prior to when the state has their budget, because about 50% of our funding comes from the state. When they cut our funding, now we have to make up that $4.7 million, and how to do that. So that's what. If
That's the
we just get
frustrating part.
The state to do their job and make our job a lot easier. I've advocated for years, and I think somewhere in the state, I think it's like a class 3 district or something like that. The budget's not due till after the state's budget. I think it's January. If they would let us make our budget 30 days after they did theirs, we'd have a lot better time making a balanced budget. So now we're just rubbing crystal balls.
And then the next thing, I think it's next week or the week after, the governor's going to present his budget. And every February, he presents it and he gives us some kind of a rough idea of what kind of funding is going to happen for the school districts for that following school year. And that's what makes Joni's job difficult, and the superintendent's, because you have to go by based on, you try to base your budget projections on what they are saying we are going to possibly get. So it's kind of like a shell game or a shot in the dark when you're saying, well, I think we're going to base it here. And then if it doesn't come to fruition, like it did this year, last year at this time, we were sitting around figuring, oh, we're going to get this level up money. And we based our budget this year on that promise. Well, then in their infinite wisdom, they decide that they're going to change that and they're going to pull that and shift it over. That money is going somewhere else into a construction type of a fund on a grant-based funding basis. And so when that kind of stuff happens and they pull the rug out from under you like that at the last minute, because they're fighting over vouchers or whatever other asinine thing that they're fighting about down there, then we're left holding the bag. And we got to come up with, well, $4 million. And I don't disagree with you at all. I think it's our job and our responsibility to make as efficient budget as we possibly can. But there are things that you know, that you don't have a lot of control over. Like, look at this list. We're negotiating with two groups right now. We just finished a teacher negotiation. And so we have to fund that. We have healthcare rates are going through the ceiling. We have to pay for the charter schools that I mentioned. We've got, you know, a lot of things that we don't have a lot of control over. And, you know, we're tied into contracts and those folks, you know, we're bound legally. We have to come up with contract agreements with them. So there's not a lot of things. There's some things we have to do the best we can. We negotiate the best contacts we can with the groups that are fair to both sides, but they cost money.
I totally agree, Jeff. I'm just saying that we are a business. And a business to succeed has to live within its budget and with what it can do, just like us as all homeowners. We can't just go out and spend because we think we're gonna get it. We got a budget for it. We gotta live within our means. That's all I'm saying. I'm gonna go on mute here. And I agree with what you're saying. I appreciate letting me talk. I'm just saying, if we can start looking at ways to trim things, if we know the money coming in is gonna go down, we gotta start looking at what we can cut back on.
Well,
That's all.
I don't think any of us disagree with that at all.
And I'm going to go ahead and point to number 7, because that ties right into this conversation. And that's the RFP, which is a request for proposal. We are going to go out. We haven't for many years shopped for district insurance. So property insurance, vehicle, workers' comp, cyber, all the insurances that affect the district, all commercial, all the, again, all the outside facility insurances that affect the school district. So we are going to go ahead and shop for that, for those insurances. We will also shop around, and again, we haven't for quite a few years, is employee benefits, health insurance, dental, vision, life, disability. We are going to go out and shop around and see what we can. Elizabeth's very happy. We are going to go out and do our due diligence and go ahead, and the health insurance is going to take a little longer. It's very complicated.
Yes.
The other insurance though is pretty straightforward, you know, vehicle, property, that's pretty straightforward. And I feel like that all expires in June. It may be the current carrier, it may not. You know, we will compare apples to apples, and we will, again, we are sending out an RFP, and we will have, I suspect, a lower rate for all insurances by June. That would be.
Thanks,
my-
Joni. You're doing great.
So again, this is just all part of, we have to close the gap. Again, everyone is doing their part. We're going to scrub the budget. We're going to go line item by line item. We're going to look at how we can bring kids back. We're going to look at the staffing. You know, we're going to look at pencils. We will go through and we will do what we can to close the deficit. I'm not going to say that we might not hit the fund balance. I don't know that, but I'm not going to say that proposing a tax increase may or may not be an option. Again, that's totally up to you on how we want to close that gap. But
I thank you for what you're doing.
But I will say we will try our best.
All right, Elizabeth, before you pass out there, what's on your mind?
Thank you. Thank you both so much. Tom, Chris, Joni, everyone. The bottom line, if I distilled everything what we heard is fantastic conversations. When the new superintendent comes on and he decides whether he's going to go with zero-based or accrue, there's 3 different choices. I hope all the folks have had a chance to do the PSBA webinar on school board finances. But if not, it's fabulous. So that's one thing. First of all, the insurance. I'm so happy. We've been talking about this for like 5 years. This is exciting, Joni. Thank you. Thank you. We never took it to the conversation to the next level because the pandemic hit, other priorities. So this is exciting. But one thing we never even got to discuss about that was a consortium. Some school districts have already pooled together.
We are.
And that's even lowered their cost even more. We haven't even started that conversation yet. I know one step at a time. Something
We're in
else
a
we,
consortium.
We are on a
Elizabeth,
health
We are in a
We've been part of
consortium.
a consortium for probably 10 years.
right, oh, no, you're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. I did not remember that correctly. That was my fault. But when we do the, put it out for RFP, okay? If it was done as a group, as a course consortium, as a group versus us independently. And also, we've never had this discussion. This may not even be plausible, I don't know, but we've never even reached out to county government. You know, maybe we could pool with them. I don't know. We've never had an opportunity to have these conversations, but it sounds like the conversations are finally beginning. So however the new superintendent wants the board, some boards are very active with the finances. They meet every month. They go through everything. Other school boards are hands off. They let administration do everything. We'll see where the new superintendent wants us to fall and how we can assist in that matter. So we'll wait and see about that. But having a list of, and we had this before, a list of set things that we can't touch. You've done this before for us. It was very helpful. These are set costs that we can't touch. It's like 75% of our budget is like in personnel and everything. But then there's that other 5%, the other 1%, the other 10% that Chris, I think, and Tom, Jeff, we were all kind of touching on that. Now, those are things that we can have work on. So let's see what the new superintendent, the new administration, how they want to work all that. But there is that other 25% that's out there. Like 75% we can't touch. Those are set costs. But this is very exciting. Thank you, Joni. You've made my day, made my year.
Perfect.
Assurance. Thank you.
What we live
Keep
for,
going, keep
Elizabeth,
going.
making you happy.
Yes, for sure. All right. Well, since
I can jump
Joni
back
hit
up
number
to,
7, we'll go back to.
I was gonna say, I
number
can jump
4.
back up to CD expires in March.
Yeah.
Okay. I touched a little bit about this in the presentation. We have locked in a $7 million in a CD, which will expire the end of March. We will make $372,960. That rate was 5.18%, which was a very good rate that we were locked into. It would be my administration's, when I talked to Frank about this, it would be the administration's recommendation not to renew that at this time. I did look at current CD rates. 12-month rate is about 4.8. And then a 6-month rate is about 3.05%. We can not lock in that rate. When you lock it in, you cannot touch it. So that's $7 million that can't be touched for a year. If we move it to the money market account, it'll make 4%. So I believe it being a little more liquid, given our financial situation right now, and we can revisit this every month. Next month, we might be in a better position and say, you know what, let's lock it in for a year, and rates may be, higher than 4%,
Are
up
the
around the
rates-
5%.
Are they fluctuating a lot?
They
right now?
are, CD rates are, yes. And again, that was the current rate as of yesterday. Again, like I said, we might revisit it in 1 or 2 months and say, we are in a good financial position to put it in a 5-month or a 6-month CD and put $5 million in. Again, but I would say the administration's recommendation is to right now in March, not renew that and let it expire. But you guys can.
I think it kind of makes sense if they're bouncing all over the place right now, to maybe look at it month to month and see what you can get as the best deal, because I know we did really well.
We did, but
the
locking it
last
in
year.
means we will not have access to it.
Right.
That's the only thing that, and the difference, if say we lock it in again at 4.8 versus 4.4%, one being completely liquid, the next not being able to touch it. Again, maybe by June, we'll have a really good idea what 24-25 is going, well, we'll have a really good idea what it's going to look like. And maybe then kind of make more of a financial decision,
Well,
at that
yeah,
time, but
especially with-
again, month to month.
Yeah, especially with things as, we don't know where
Mhm.
they're headed right now. I
Mhm.
think that's wise.
Yeah,
to
we,
keep
we
it-
have
keep
until
it
March
liquid.
31st to make that decision, but I'm looking ahead a little bit and And that is what I'm seeing. So I just want to just give you an FYI that's coming up.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, I guess that takes us to number 6, the fiscal code change in the school code. And I know there were about 4 pages of them here. Some dealing with substitutes and some curriculum changes. I know that they were all listed there, and there's quite a few of them.
Chair
Student-
Jeff, may I make a quick comment, please?
Sure.
Thank you. It's a fascinating list. Yes, wait and see. It is frustrating, but wait and see. How they're gonna allow us to access if we are gonna access these funding sources. But this brings us back to that conversation started 4 or 5 years ago. Back when Susan was here, good Lord. Anyways, to think that our administration, our employees have extra time on their hands to write grants and to go after this money is, I think, unreasonable. They can do a couple here and there because they've done the same one. It's the same pattern, the same program. So it's sort of like, almost a cut and paste, put in some numbers. That's understandable. But when you have a new program, we've talked about this, and then the conversation stops, but maybe with the new superintendent, this conversation might go somewhere. To seriously look at our options to have a grant writer who specializes in these things so we can be more aggressive. Not that our administration lacks the skills, knowledge, or ability. That's not it. I just don't feel that they have extra time that they can do this. That's not what they were hired to do. So again, I look forward to having that conversation in the near future. So thank you, because there's funding in here that's it's knocking at our door and we need it. So thank you.
Well, I know we've had grant writers in the past, and that hasn't always gone as well as we had expected. Butch probably remembers.
Yeah, the last time we hired a grant writer, we anticipated she'd be paying for her salary, and it didn't quite work out that way. But things were different back 10 years ago. Maybe it's something we could revisit, but I'm really not looking at hiring a new employee at this moment. I think we have to go through and see what we need and what we have. 'Cause I'm looking through there, maybe I'm missing a few things, but a lot of the biggest grants really are the safety and security ones. And I think more people have been doing that sort of thing for years, for that, the PCCD money. So, I mean, that's one of the biggest ones I saw. Some of the other stuff as far as the student teachers, that's a $10,000 grant that the student teacher can apply for. That's not that we do, they can do it themselves. It's used to help, and as far as I know, to entice people to go into education.
Right.
Because there's a problem with, people that are paying their way through college to have to take off work to be a student teacher, and sometimes it's a hardship. So they're looking at a way to help compensate them. And as far as the day-to-day subs, I don't think that really applies to us, since we contract through ESS for our subs. So we're not actually hiring a sub, we're hiring ESS to provide the sub. So it doesn't fall under the same requirements that if we would hire, back when we used to hire them individually, you had to make sure there was no one available to fill that before you hired a retiree. And we don't have that problem now. So maybe I'm missing something reading through it, but there's not much really that applies to us doing.
So that's what we do. We have an agency that we hire.
Yes.
Yes,
We hire the agency and then they supply us with subs as we need them.
right.
Right.
It was kind of hard for me to grasp this concept years ago when we first started it, how we were going to save money. But the biggest thing is because we're hiring this agency, not hiring a sub, we don't have to put money into the retirement fund. So one of the biggest savings is we don't pay the appeasers. So that we hire the state or this ESS agency, they provide the benefits, they provide everything. I think we're paying them $135 a day, maybe. I'm not sure what it is.
It's no different than Trucklight hiring a employment agency and
To
then
hire, yes.
to hire people.
Pretty
It's
much the
no-
same concept. And this company, when it came here, we found that they're actually being used by most of the school districts
Mhm.
surrounding us is using the same agency. Because everyone's having the same problem hiring. And most of our subs that I know of, and I deal with them a lot, that are retirees that
Mhm.
couldn't work under the old system because of this subsystem we're using, we can hire a lot of retirees. So it's actually saving us a lot, providing, and I'd be willing to bet, and I don't know, I haven't talked. to
Because
anyone
they're
about it.
not double dipping. Where they're retired from the school district and then drawing a pension and drawing a paycheck, which they can't do.
Well, they kind of are because,
Well,
but
But they're
employed
not, but they're getting paid from the agency,
not
not from
by us.
us.
by- And one thing.
And
that
we're not paying into their
well,
retirement, so
probably-
it's the,
I'd be willing to bet any given day, we're probably not running 100%.
you call them
fulfillment.
annuities too, don't you?
Annuities, yeah,
Yeah,
annuities.
that's what
So, but
we have
they-
the same thing.
I'm betting we don't have enough subs every day to fill the vacancies we have, even with
I
this
know you
agency.
don't.
Mhm,
And if we took the retirees out, it would probably be a heck of a lot worse,
mhm.
so.
Yeah, and I think we even make it the incentive for the retirees is we pay them a little bit
I think it's
Above-
$15 more.
above what the rate of a non-retiree
And
would be
All the
And-
other benefits are not, you don't pay them either.
in order to pull them back.
The agency takes care of whatever
Unemployment.
unemployment,
retirement, they
insurance,
can
all
actually-
that stuff
and
is all taken care of by them, not us.
If they work enough through VSS, they can actually have healthcare benefits, all that stuff provided by them. So it's a win-win for us and for
Mm.
them.
I agree with that. I do.
All right. Anything else on those school code changes? I don't know whether anybody has anything to add to that, you know, Randy, you have anything that you?
Something I just noticed on here now, this plan con we're talking about, it's delayed until July 1st, 2024. Yeah. So we won't know anything about any of this stuff till after July. That's what I kind of anticipated. They're gonna hold on to that 700 million.
But it may have stalled because of the council.
Yeah.
More of the same. All right, I think we've covered everything on the agenda unless I missed something. Good discussion here today. We're at the very, very early stages of the budget process, extremely early. I want everybody to keep that in mind. It always looks dire at this point of the year, and it maybe look a little worse this year than it has in the past at this point. But I do have faith in our superintendent and administrative team. I know that they do a tremendous job going through that budget. And I mean, they go through it and look at every way that we can save. And this year, it's even more imperative that we do it, I guess. But
From my perspective, I think this facility or this finance committee is probably the most complicated committee we have.
mhm,
Because I don't care how long you've been doing it, unless you do it every day, you don't understand it. We all have questions, but we all learn. Every time I come here, we learn something different. So it's really important that you guys, especially you and Chris, Tom, get involved as much as you can, especially in this committee, to know what we're doing and try to help yourself figure out what we're talking about. Even when Joni does it a lot, she'll throw out an acronym and I'll have to ask her what it is, because I don't understand half this stuff. So you guys are, I mean, I've been doing it for a long time. You guys will be even more confused because it's newer to you. Don't be afraid to ask questions. If you see something on our board agenda, which you was active yesterday. If you see something on there, when you're reading through, you have a question, don't be afraid to ask. But all I'm gonna ask you to do, if you do ask, just send Frank after Thursday, send Frank an email saying, I have a question on such and such on the agenda, but send it to all of us. Because if you have
Right.
that question, Chris might have that question, I might have that question, but instead of him answering you, then me asking the same thing, just reply to all of us, ask the same question, all of us, that we were all gonna gain a little bit of knowledge. And I'm
Right.
sure we all, I ask questions all the time.
I'm gonna ask you a question right now. because we had talked about availability. Now, the 27th, next meeting for this committee, February 27th. More than likely, I'll be able to be here. March, April, May, June, July, clear till probably November.
Yeah.
If I come here, I have to take leave
Right.
from work to come
We
here.
don't,
So,
I don't think you should have to take off from
Hey.
your livelihood to come to a volunteer position. And this is a volunteer position.
right,
When you can attend, I'm just asking, please attend.
right,
When you can't attend because of other requirements, don't feel, I mean, we all have them. I know I missed meetings last year because I was traveling.
right.
I'm not gonna give up my.
I'm only
social life.
missing them because of
Yeah.
work. I'm not missing them because of other stuff. I
Yeah,
mean, like
but-
I told you before, I live 2 miles that way.
But we all.
I can jog here.
We all know that we have outside
And,
responsibilities, but that's part of life. You have to do what's best for you and your family. And this is just something you're doing for the community. We would like you to come as many as you can.
right,
If you can't make those meetings, just go through the minutes, look and see what you missed. If you have questions on something, ask. That's what I'm
Okay.
asking you. So
Alright.
we know.
I mean,
I don't think
since-
anyone's gonna make every meeting.
since
every
we're
employee.
here, you know, and we've discussed this a little bit. I wanted to
Yeah.
have it clarified that,
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
look, I knew you talked to me a couple weeks ago
yeah.
about your work schedule. Yeah, I'm still a little confused on your work schedule, but I think sometimes you might be confused.
Oh, I work
Because
so
you don't
many
know-
hours
You don't know
because,
when you're working. And we try to work around it. But again, the most important thing you have to do is your job, because that takes care of you and your family.
right,
This is a secondary thing, that when you can come here, the only thing I'm asking you, when you can't make it because of something, read as much as you can, know as much as you can, gather as much of information about the stuff
Mhm.
that's gonna be out there. If you have questions or something you missed, call me. Call Frank, call any of us. So ask, or email, if you're not comfortable calling, email. We'll get emails out, but all I'm asking, if you email all of us. Just
Mhm.
respond as a group. That way, with you, if you have the same question, Jeff might have it, or Elizabeth, or someone. We all looking for answers sometimes.
right.
So.
Yeah, I mean, my work day started last night,
Yeah.
so I'm still going,
Yeah, just
so,
try to attend as many as you can. And
right,
if you can't, usually, and if it's possible for you to do it virtually, usually we
Yes.
have a Zoom link for most of these. if
that's
not
why I
all
said
these
that the last meeting, if I can be here physically, or if I can be here Zoom, I can be here physically
Yeah.
because I don't have internet access for Zoom at work.
I can't believe that. You trust
They do, district can tell you what my
Yeah.
truck's doing,
them.
but
Yeah, but yeah, it's just try to gather as much information as you can. I mean, I don't know if you signed up for it yet, if your schedule allows it, but that PSBA required training that you have,
yeah,
you'll learn a lot there. I mean, you're gonna be with a group of people that all new for the most, so they're gonna talk, it's gonna be like school board 101. It's gonna be like elementary school, and you're gonna work you all the way up. Because there's so much you have to learn. There's nothing you can do really that prepares you for this job that you just undertook as a school board member. And we have to know Joni's job, we have to know the education side. We're required to know so much. But the most
Right.
important thing we have to know is how to hire good people and let them do their job.
oh yeah, I agree, because I struggle with that.
Yeah, we have to. and
We're told, they told us the other day, because of how short we are on employees, hire them now if they can drive, and we'll take care of them in 6 months if they don't work out.
Right, so, and that's
So,
where our.
so why do we want to be like that?
So our thing, we have to hire the best people we can and depend on them to fill in our blanks. Like, Frank's gonna be the expert on education.
Right,
That's what his job is, not ours. And Tony's the expert on finance.
right,
We have to sit here and listen to them all. Our job is to hire the people and let them do their job. Our job is to approve a budget as presented to us. Now, I know Chris had comments about how we look at stuff, and we all look at it through those same glasses and same lens every year. We all do. Unfortunately, when you say, let's cut, like Elizabeth said, there's certain things that we can't cut. We know we have to have so many special ed teachers. We know we have to have so many, so many teachers per day in the classroom. We
Right.
have to have this stuff. The state tells us we're required to do this. So we know there's a little bit, there is fat that we can cut, and that's
Because
what we have to start looking at.
if the student population continues to drop, we certainly don't want to hire more staff. Because
And that's
that's not,
exactly, and that's exactly what, one of the most important things that the superintendent
Mhm.
does with the entire admin team. He sits down and looks at the entire district staffing.
right,
And if they can save positions, especially through attrition, where meaning they don't have to replace somebody. If they can, if somebody retires, for example,
Mhm.
and, we had 3 English teachers, and we only need 2. Okay, based upon our student needs and how many kids we have in each section and so on. They look at that, and the principals will say, yeah, I think I can get away with 2 English sections or teacher this year. So when that person retires, we don't replace them. And it's the same way across the district. If we can save positions that way, we certainly don't want to hire people and then turn around and say, oh, sorry, we have to furlough you, because that's, you certainly don't want to do that to
When we
anybody.
furlough a teacher, we don't really save money the first year, because we have to pay unemployment.
Yeah.
So you try not to furlough, you try to get through with attrition. I know, I saw one on there the other day, a lady I know is retiring from Woodward Elementary. So what they'll do, they'll look at, okay, I don't know what grade she taught, but say she's in 2nd grade, they're gonna look and say, okay, we have 2 2nd grade classes of 15. We have 2 first grade classes of 10. Or do we have to replace that 2nd grade teacher, or we can make a 2nd grade teacher of 20? So that's what his job's gonna be, and that's why you
Right.
looked on there and saw they're gonna go through pretty much every grade, every class, every school, and look at, see what we need and what we can do without, and try to move stuff around. There might be a teacher, maybe we don't need a biology teacher at Bucktail, but we need a chemistry teacher at Central Mountain because of demand, that we can move people around as long as the certifications are the same. And that's stuff that we have to allow him to do, that we're gonna count on him to do here in the next couple of weeks.
And a lot of that is easier to do at the secondary level, because you have different certifications. and, easier than maybe at the elementary, because you're pretty much locked into how many classrooms you have and how many students you've got. And it's, and that's across the board. It's with special education, it's with the CTC, it's with everything, every single employee we look at, and not just teachers, but support people and, everywhere. They look at every single employee and their staff and the staff.
Now, our VOTEC down here, do Bucktail kids come down? to
Yes, there's 2 different sets of them. What happens, I gotta make sure I know this right. I think the 9th and 10th grade kids come down from 8 o'clock to like 11:30. Then they're bused back to Bucktail. And they do their other classes in the afternoon. I believe then when the other, the 11th and 12th graders come down at noon, I think it's what it's set up. They come down at noon, then they're bused back at 3:30. They split up, so, and that way they have to take part of their classes, like the core group, they'll take at Bucktail. Some of them, I know there's been a couple that chose just to stay down, do the core group down here. So, yeah, they all come
Is
down,
it-
it's available.
Is it a practicality that we can get Bald Eagle area students to come to our VOTEC?
No, because they're
Yeah.
different school
Different school
districts.
district.
But Boulder, we're actually, they're part of
CPI.
CPI, yes.
But that's what I didn't know, if we could have them come here and Bald Eagle pay us to bring their students here.
I dealt with that in another school district, and they have to want to do that, because they have to deal with CPI.
Right.
I dealt with that when I was with Williamsport.
Like we missed the bus on that.
And South Williamsport wanted to come. to
CPI
my
has been there
career
longer.
tech center, but they had to facilitate that, because they had to pull out of their agreement with Lyco CPC, so that's If they have a signed agreement with CPI, I'm sure it's probably.
Cause like I remember when I went to school, and I went to school in Hughesville, and once he went to Penn Tech,
Yeah, cause they, yeah.
It was
we
whack.
did that too till we started going up, yeah.
you know, it was
But
whack, so.
to answer his question, I was on the joint operating committee of CPI when I was a board member at Bellefonte. And those options that you're talking about, they were explored by this district
Mhm.
with CPI, and all the numbers were ran, and they found that it wasn't cost effective to send their kids up there. They were looking at sending kids up there at that point, and the bus times, all the pieces, they found it wasn't cost effective
For us to go there.
for us to go there, and then that's when Mr. Mertz back here, and our program, our CTC program here, I believe is pretty successful.
What about
Yeah.
Jersey
They're
Shore?
trying to say,
We doubled.
What about Jersey Shore? Are they going, where are they going?
Jersey Shore has their own. standard.
Yeah, they,
Oh, they do?
Yeah.
all right, well, since we're kind of a little getting off topic here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but I
We're,
think it's necessary because
well,
unfortunately with Chris and Tom being new, this is all the stuff they don't know. This is why I keep saying we have to start real slow. And I'm not.
but I'm saying, I'm saying, I don't mind, I don't have the
Work up to it.
discussion, but we should probably
I
adjourn
miss.
our finance meeting
Oh, yeah.
at this
Yeah.
point. So I will, unless there's any objection, I'll call the meeting adjourned.